The material I have reviewed in this chapter suggests that once anger comes into play, people find it extremely difficult to empathize with and understand another perspective. A better place to start is, as Jesus advised, with yourself and the log in your own eye. Batson and Lowenstein both found that debiasing occurred only when subjects were forced to look at themselves. And you will see the log only if you set out on a deliberate and effortful quest to look for it. Try this now. Think of a recent interpersonal conflict with someone you care about, and then find one way in which your behavior was not exemplary. Maybe you did something insensitive, even if you had a right to do it, or hurtful, even if you meant well, or inconsistent with your principles, even though you can readily justify it. When you first catch sight of a fault in yourself, you'll likely hear frantic arguments from your inner lawyer excusing you and blaming others, but try not to listen. You are on a mission to find at least one thing that you did wrong. When you extract a splinter, it hurts briefly, but then you feel relief, even pleasure. When you find a fault in yourself, it will hurt, briefly, but if you keep going and acknowledge the fault, you are likely to be rewarded with a flash of pleasure that is mixed, oddly, with a hint of pride. It is the pleasure of taking responsibility for your own behavior. It is the feeling of honor. Finding fault with yourself is also the key to overcoming the hypocrisy and judgmentalism that damage so many valuable relationships. The instant you see some contribution you made to a conflict, your anger softens, maybe just a bit, but enough that you might be able to acknowledge some merit on the other side. You can still believe you are right and the other person is wrong, but if you can move to believing that you are mostly right and your opponent is mostly wrong, you have the basis for an effective and non-humiliating apology. You can take a small piece of the disagreement and say, "I should not have done X, and I can see why you felt Y." Then, by the power of reciprocity, the other person will likely feel a strong urge to say, "Yes, I was really upset by X, but I guess I shouldn't have done P, so I can see why you felt Q." Reciprocity, amplified by self-serving biases, drove you apart back when you were matching insults or hostile gestures. But you can turn the process around and use reciprocity to end a conflict and save a relationship. The human mind may have been shaped by evolutionary processes to play Machiavellian tit for tat, and it seems to come equipped with cognitive processes that predispose us to hypocrisy, self-righteousness, and moralistic conflict. But sometimes, by knowing the mind's structure and strategies, we can step out of the ancient game of social manipulation and enter into a game of our choosing. By seeing the log in our own eye, you can become less biased, less moralistic, and therefore less inclined toward argument and conflict. You can begin to follow the perfect way, the path to happiness that leads through acceptance, which is the subject of the next chapter. Chapter 5. The Pursuit of Happiness. Good men at all times surrender in truth all attachments. The holy spend not idle words on things of desire. When pleasure or pain comes to them, the wise feel above pleasure and pain. Buddha. Do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well. Epictetus. If money or power could buy happiness, then the author of the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes should have been overjoyed. The text attributes itself to a king in Jerusalem, who looks back on his life and his search for happiness and fulfillment. He tried at one point to make a test of pleasure by seeking happiness in his riches. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and delights of the flesh, and many concubines. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. Ecclesiastes, chapter 2, verses 4 through 10. But in what may be one of the earliest reports of a midlife crisis, the author finds it all pointless. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had spent in doing it, and again all was vanity and a chasing after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 11.